Okay, we're back talking with Barb more about her and her epilepsy, her life dealing with it. um, Tonight I want to talk to you about the social stigma and what it's like when you have to deal with other people who really don't know much about epilepsy except what they've heard as rumors and half-truths, and how it's been portrayed in those rare instances in the media. I'd like to start with peripheral effects such as migraines. Do you think that migraines may actually be a side effect or a byproduct of of epilepsy?
I think that migraine are definitely associated or related to epilepsy in some manner. I'm not exactly sure how, but I do know that my neurologist and family doctor both told me that several people who have epilepsy, in several cases, that they have or have known of also suffer from migraines as well. So I think that there's definitely some kind of connection. I know usually with me, I'll usually have a migraine either pre-seizure or post-seizure.
Now, having mentioned that, do you find that there are different times in the year, say spring, summer, fall, or winter, where your seizures seem to be more frequent?
I wouldn't say there's really a time of year where they're more frequent, but for me, I would definitely say that the weather affects them.
How so?
I think it's definitely connected with barometric pressure in some way. It seems to be whenever the weather changes drastically from sunny to a thunderstorm or vice versa, or a big temperature change that can very easily bring on a seizure or a migraine.
You mentioned thunderstorms, and of course with thunderstorms there's a lot of static electricity. That's what causes the lightning in the first place. Basically, when you see lightning, it's the completion of a circuit, albeit an invisible one, where positive ions interact with negative ions, and the point at which they connect, you get the lightning strike. It's been known that bright sudden flashes of light can trigger seizures in some people. I've also heard it said that fluorescent lights, because it's not a continuous light like a regular old-fashioned light bulb is, that a fluorescent light actually flashes hundreds of times per second. When I was a child, we had a kid in school that had to be taken out of class simply because of the fluorescent lights used to give this person terrible headaches. And I believe that person may have also had juvenile onset epilepsy. Do you think that's a reasonable claim to make?
Definitely.
Speaking of which, there are two different types of epilepsy, juvenile and adult onset. Aside from the names, of course, what are the differences between the two?
Well, with the juvenile epilepsy, the hope and prayer is once the child hits pre-puberty or puberty years, that the seizures will stop.
Does that happen?
I'm not sure I can't quote you the exact statistics, but a lot of the time, yes, it does, thankfully.
But in adult onset epilepsy, it doesn't go away, does it?
It never goes away. There's no cure yet. However, 2/3 approximately of seizure patients have control, which means that their medications keep them controlled so that they're having no seizures, or no breakthrough seizures, as they call them. or maybe...
Like the seizures start, but then the medication is supposed
Right,
to stop it.
right. Or maybe one seizure, every 6 months. Or it's very, very rare. Usually, though, if you can get good control with medications in those patients, that person would have the hope and there'd be no reason, and usually can get their driver's license back, stuff like that. However, there is 30% of cases of epilepsy, such as myself and a few friends of mine that I know, and people up at the epilepsy clinic that have uncontrolled or retractable epilepsy, which simply means that it's not controlled by any medication. So the seizures will come and go as they please, basically, even with medication being taken daily.
Do you think that most people are even aware of the differences or know that there is a difference?
I don't. No, probably not.
So you would say that it's not an unreasonable claim to make that epilepsy doesn't have the same kind of coverage as the more, if you'll forgive the term, the sexier diseases like cancer or other social things such as drinking and driving. You can't turn on the TV without hearing about drinking and driving, or cancer from cigarette smoke, or breast cancer. Why do you think that epilepsy doesn't get the same kind of recognition?
Well, to answer your first question, when's the last time that you saw an ad on TV for epilepsy?
I have never, ever seen an ad on television. I've never seen a billboard or a print ad about epilepsy awareness. I've never even seen it on television or in a movie, except as if they were making light of the condition of epilepsy, like they'd say, oh, look at so-and-so, he's pitching a fit again. But that is, I think, the general public's only real exposure to epilepsy, and it isn't even an accurate portrayal.
It's just lack of education, and if the information isn't out there, people really can't learn, can they? And it kind of is very frustrating to people like myself who do have a struggle with it on a daily basis, that it's kind of belittling, and it's like disrespectful almost, I guess. Like, society just doesn't want you to have any recognition. It's almost like it's keep it quiet and push these people over here because they have epilepsy. I mean, that's the best way that I could describe it.
Almost like it's not even important.
Not so much that it's not important. It's just, I think people are afraid of it, for one thing. I mean, if you've ever seen somebody have a seizure, it's pretty darn scary.
Do you think that a lot of people out there have actually seen anyone have this an epileptic seizure if they didn't have somebody either in their family or in their social circles who had epilepsy?
No, probably not. I mean, I've had epilepsy for like 10 years, like you said, and I've had, like, my mother's never seen me had a grand mal, or a tonic-clonic. Through no fault of hers. It's just timing. I mean, you can't time them, so you just never know, right? But my family, my whole set of family, basically, none of them have ever seen me have a violent tonic-clonic seizure. So if you haven't seen it, you can't understand it, can you?
No, that's the thing, and I think ignorance plays a part in this whole thing, simply because the word isn't getting out there. Okay, my next...
I should mention though that I do have another family member that does suffer from it as well, and I do receive a level of understanding from that person because they can comprehend. So I think it's just because it's not talked about, it's not spread around. And because it's not spread around, nobody can learn from it. And because nobody's learning from it, it just stays stagnant. I mean, how can something grow if it's not allowed to grow, and if people aren't talking, and if people aren't doing anything, and if people aren't advocating for it and trying to step forward? And it's very similar. It needs to be mentioned that it's very similar with a lot of the invisible diseases, such as depression, bipolar or manic depression, schizophrenia, chronic pain, for example. People that suffer with excruciating pain every day. These are all illnesses that people, have to deal with, but they're invisible, so-called invisible illnesses. So if people around in your circle, you look fine, people don't see anything, then they're not going to understand. But yet, the person on the inside, or the person who has that invisible illness, be it any of the ones that I mentioned, it's all too real for them, just as real as if they had visible scars or wounds all over their body. And in that case, it would be very evident to everybody that, hey, something's going on here, what's wrong? So the invisible illness thing it's a very big issue for a lot of people with a lot of illnesses other than epilepsy as well. So they need to be advocated for as well. I just wanted to mention that too.
That raises another good point. Social stigma. There does certainly seem to be, as you mentioned, a stigma about epilepsy in comparison with other illnesses, such as cancer, for example. What are your thoughts on that?
To me, in my opinion, it seems like people just don't want to talk about it a lot of the time.
Almost like it's a dirty little secret?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a matter of embarrassment or shame or, again, lack of knowledge. But, let's look at history. All the way back to ancient civilization. And all you have to do is do some research on that, and you'll see very clearly how people with epilepsy were treated, back then. They were outcast right out of society. So, I guess to compare things, we've come a long way, haven't we? But I think a lot of people, because of the heavy amounts of anti-epileptic drugs that people are on, which we know depress cognitive functions and alter behavior patterns and emotions and severely affect your memory, slow your speech, make you very groggy and hazy, and it takes you sometimes a long time to process things. Sometimes you can't process things at all. I think if someone doesn't know you or doesn't know your situation or where you're at, then they're just going to look at you and think, what's their first indication going to be? Either A, maybe you're a drug user, or B, you have some sort of mental illness. And I think that scares people. But for people who are suffering with having to deal with not only the seizures, but these horrid medications, because I just recently read that the anti-epileptic medications are just as devastating as the seizures themselves to the body.
Well, if anybody would know that firsthand, it would be you, given the different meds that you've been on and the length of time that you've been on them. You've written some notes there before we started tonight. What have you got there for us?
I'd written down a few little bits of information that, because I've had a few seizures, and
You were having them last night, weren't you?
I'm a little groggy, and I didn't want to misquote, or I just wanted to mention too that it said, unlike cancer or Parkinson's disease, which has the icon Michael J. Fox, who's a public figure, well known, who raises tens of millions of dollars a year for research. Epilepsy does not have a public figure. I think we kind of touched on that. There's just no public figures out there speaking up for it, which I think would help a lot, and nobody is talking about it, which we sort of touched on that. And good for Michael J. Fox. I mean, I think he's doing an amazing job. I'm reading his book slowly, and I have the hugest amount of respect for the man. I think he's incredible. So, no disrespect meant. It's just a comparison of that most causes or diseases or disorders, whatever it may be, anything, we use a famous person or something to promote it or to get money or right. And epilepsy doesn't really have anyone, and I think that would probably do us a lot of good. Also, despite some advances that have helped people with treatable epilepsy, for the 30% rate with uncontrolled forms, little change has been made in 40 years. So that's not...
It's not very encouraging.
It's not very encouraging. And I wanted to also read, just bear with me for a second, this quote by Dr. Warren. Sorry, he's not a doctor. He runs a financial company in Boston, and he actually formed a research organization with 3 doctors. His daughter suffers from epilepsy, and I wanted to quote Mr. Lammert. He said, "It's gotten better today, but even among very well-educated people, people do not like to talk about epilepsy." And many people feel that it carries a worse stigma than cancer or HIV even. At some level, it's society that needs to wake up and realize that it's just another neurological disorder.
It's very well said. I know you've been doing a lot of research into this tonight, and I noticed during the last interview you seemed to be stuck for words at times. Were those seizures as well, do you think?
Yes. Those are little simple partial seizures which are affecting my speech center, where I'm grasping for words. And
do you know the words you mean? It's just not coming out? You don't even know the word you're looking for?
I know I'm looking for the word, and I kind of can think of it, but it's just not there, and I can feel it, and it's really hard to describe, but I'm pulling at it, and I'm pulling at it, and I'm pulling at it, and that's why sometimes you'll get out of me a word that's similar to what I'm trying to say, or something that doesn't really make sense, but part of a word, and that's...
A sound alike.
Yes, and that's why a lot of the times I'll say, you know what I mean, or I can't think of it, and I've just recently learned that those are actually simple partial seizures coming from my speech center. So.
Now, you mentioned the stigma of epilepsy. For you personally, what stigma do you feel, and which do you think is the worst? Is that one?
No, I'm thinking.
See, and that's a good example right there, because unless you know, sometimes you can't tell.
I do know, but I'm trying to put it into words.
No, I mean, you can't tell if you're having a seizure if you're just thinking,
right.
Because sometimes, like you said, those little partials look like you're daydreaming.
I think the worst thing for me, the worst stigma for me, is well-meaning people saying things that, even though they're well-meant, are just
foolish.
The wrong thing to say. And you know that it's not in malice or harm, like meant in harm, but you hear it over and over again, and I know it's a common thing with people with, again, with the invisible illnesses, any of them, that are heard a lot of the time. And it's probably the most frustrating thing for me, even though things are said in a positive way, and it is appreciated by me very much, always, when I receive support from family and friends, and I'm always grateful. I mean, I'm blessed. But if people knew and could understand that saying, well, just take a nap and, you'll feel better. It's just not going to cut it. Or, I can't think of anything right now. You probably have heard a few.
So, having a nap and maybe you'll feel better, that seems to be what you'd say to someone that's got a cold.
Yeah.
Or is tired. We got a wedding coming up. With your condition, what's that been like, doing all the planning and things like that?
Well, I'm obviously very excited about marrying you. I love you to death, and I think it's going to be wonderful. And the planning has been great. I've had a lot of fun planning it with you. I'm just a little, I guess, rattled that a girlfriend mentioned to me just a couple days ago that it didn't seem very fair, and it seemed almost cruel that my epilepsy had kind of peaked right now, and me having to deal with facing oncoming surgery soon, all of that right now when I'm planning for the happiest day of my life. So I think that's kind of challenging, but I'm trying to put it all into perspective, and I'm trying to focus on the future, because that's what it's all about. That's what's making me happy. And it is stressful, though. It's stressful because I know with the way I am right now, having been bedridden for the last, quite a few, almost 2 months, and just not able to function up here, and starting on the new med, and having all these seizures, it makes it difficult to follow through on plans and to stay organized. And I get a little worried sometimes that it's coming fast, and I'm not going to have everything done. But what do you got to do? You just got to keep going, and we've had a lot of support, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you out there for all the help and everything, because, yeah, you guys are amazing. So, yeah.
Now, in your personal experience, what has been the biggest difficulty that you face in explaining your epilepsy to those that don't have epilepsy and don't really have much of a clue about it?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about people saying well-meaning things, and they're meaning well, but because they don't understand, it happens a lot. I know it happens to everyone who's in the same situation. If people think you look fine, then they're not going to think anything's wrong. And one of the things that I've heard so many times over and over again is, but you look fine. But you look so good. And that's my number one worst pet peeve, I'll be quite honest. Secondly, it's hard explaining to people because I have a lot of people who push me and are trying to be positive for me and telling me to go take a karate class or go volunteer. It's really not a good thing for me because it just makes me more discouraged because I can't do those things. And all it does is make me have to focus more on the facts. Every time I hear it, I can't do it. And the more that you keep telling me or asking me, well, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you doing it? Why haven't you done this yet? Oh, you should be doing that. You know, you should do this. It'd be good for you.
Don't you think it's a little galling, people telling you what will be good for you when they don't really have a clue what's going on with you? Personally, if it was me, I certainly would.
It's frustrating, but I know it's done in well intention. But there's a reason why I am the way I am. It's not by choice. It's not by want that I'm not working and that I can't do this and that I can't do that. I mean, you gotta just do the best that you can with what you have. And pointing out to me that I should be doing the things that are things that I can't do, it's really discouraging for me. Telling me that I look fine when I'm facing brain surgery, which is terrifying me, that's not helpful. I'm scared. You know, I put it out there that I'm scared. Nothing else I can do. It's a pretty big thing to admit you're scared and to face your fears. And I can't explain it to people any better than that. You sleep a lot. Why do you always sleep so much? Well, you take 16 pills a day and see how much you sleep. Again, meant in well intent and not in a harmful, hurtful way. And it's things like this, though, that people need to be educated on in general. Everybody.
As we round out this segment, what would you like to tell them?
I think it would be good in general for everybody to see a seizure once. You know, like I mean in real life, as much as it's scary, and I don't want anybody to ever have to go through it personally. I don't mean it like that, but I don't think anybody's ever gonna understand it unless they actually see it.
So educate yourselves.
But you have to want to do that, and it's your choice.
So it comes down to, if you want to, you'll make a way, and if you don't want to, you'll make an excuse.
Right. But somebody has to step up. People have to step up and educate, because that 30% of people who have uncontrolled seizures, if nothing's changed in 40 years, what's going to change in the next 40 years? I mean, I can't do much myself physically at this point. And I don't have a lot of money, so I can't donate the research, but I can talk about it. And people behind me that are growing up with epilepsy, the young ones, I don't want them in 15, 10 years even, 5 years, to have the lack of resources and support from society that's there now. I want them to have what's deserved.
Now, before we go, you wrote a list of contemporary and historical figures that had epilepsy. Can you read out some of those names? I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out who's on that list.
Julius Caesar, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Beethoven, Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Lewis Carroll, Agatha Christie, Buddha, Danny Glover, Neil Young, Richard Burton, and did I say Aristotle? I think that's it.
At least that's it as far as anybody was.
Yeah, I mean, that's it on my list, but I mean, I only copied half of the list, and there was a lot of, there was
and yet,
double that on the list.
I don't think a lot of people knew. Like, I had no idea. Danny Glover or Beethoven, Aristotle, Socrates,
Elton John.
I did not know that. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Educating yourselves is the key.
Why aren't they talking about it? If they're famous social figures and they have it, why aren't they talking about it, I wonder?
A very good question. Again, it comes down to, I guess, that social stigma. But I mean, the information is out there, yet they don't want to talk about it. There's got to be a very good reason why. Well, I say very good. There has to be a reason why. Whether it's valid or not is, anybody's guess. But I think to sum it all up, fear and ignorance go hand in hand. Fear about something that is unknown and ignorance about that subject, not knowing about that subject, go hand in hand. But if you educate yourself, you get rid of the ignorance. And once the ignorance goes, I think the fear goes away as well.
There's nothing really to be feared.
And there's no such thing as the unknown either. Only those things that are temporarily hidden, temporarily obscured by ignorance and lack of knowledge. Would you say that's fair?
I would say that's definitely fair. And I would say to the public who are, or to society in general, who are afraid of this condition, if you think you're scared, how do you think we feel when we're lying on the floor or falling down the stairs or alone somewhere having a seizure? That's fear. That's true fear. Turning your face away from it and ignoring it isn't going to make it go away.
Thanks, Barb. I think it was very well said.
Thank you.
In the next segment, we're going to talk about your sources of income and how that also further limits you. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.